President Biden is in Los Angeles this morning hosting nearly 24 world leaders at the Summit of the Americas. The event brings together governments from Latin and North America to focus on pressing challenges, including economic prosperity, climate change, and migration, of course. The president tackled that very issue during his welcoming speech yesterday.
Safe and orderly migration is good for all of our economies, including the United States. It can be a catalyst for sustainable growth.
So for more on this, we want to bring in CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe, who is in Los Angeles. Finally, I can see what's going on behind you. When I talked to you earlier, it was all dark. All I saw was twinkling lights. Ed, the president made several economic and migration-related announcements yesterday. Can you tell us more about, what he said, what we can expect? And I think sort of the big question is it just about a speech, or are there going to be any, concrete deliverables that come out of this?
Concrete deliverables, maybe not. I think what you're going to see here is a real attempt to just continue to make sure this region is cooperating with each other on a bunch of overlapping issues that ultimately lead to the big one, immigration. And it's important to remember when this group of people, this group of leaders talks about immigration, it's not just the millions that end up coming into this country. It's the millions that get displaced out of Venezuela and go to Colombia or Chile or even places like Aruba. It's Haitians who leave the island and go to Central America or into Mexico after the earthquakes and the political strife that's happened there. It's Nicaraguans leaving an authoritarian regime and trying to get into Costa Rica, which is a much healthier democracy and economy. And so and then it's Canada, which more than any other country in this hemisphere, at least these days, is taking in refugees or immigrants who are then becoming citizens. So it's a regional issue, one that cuts across different ways. Obviously a huge issue of concern in this country in terms of security and the economy and politics, but one that reflects an ongoing shift of people across the region because of politics, because of the pandemic and the economic strife it's caused, and chiefly also because of climate change, the inability to yield crops on land that is now too arid to do so, or people who are, simply because they can't do that, hungry and have to go somewhere else to either grow crops or make a living. And so you're going to see a lot of conversation this week on a regional economic framework, agreements on refugees, and issues like food security and making sure that vaccines can be distributed to some of the countries that maybe don't have as big a supply as ones like this one.
So, Ed, several leaders, including Mexico's president, are boycotting the summit after the White House refused to invite authoritarian leaders from Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. What challenges does this pose for the president?
Well, the first one was sort of optical last night, or sort of a PR issue, which was he was there greeting all these leaders, and the president of the United States, the so-called leader of the free world, was shaking the hands of a lot of foreign ministers. And in diplomacy, in protocol, you don't see that, especially at a summit that you're hosting. You should be only dealing with your counterparts at that point. But places like Mexico, Guatemala, Bolivia, El Salvador, Honduras only sent, in essence, cabinet ministers, not their leaders. Now, Mexico, it had a lot to do with Cuba, yes, because Andrés Manuel López Obrador is a tight ally of the Cuban regime. Domestically, he'd have some issues if he showed up to this after the United States didn't invite them. Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, it has to do with the fact that they don't want to come to a summit like this and face the music on what they are or are not doing to keep their citizens from finding reason to leave their countries and come to this one or go to Canada or other places. Bolivia is tight with Cuba, so they don't show up. Ditto Guyana, which I believe is the other one that didn't send its head of state. So, there's a lot of regional and domestic issues behind why they didn't necessarily show up. They don't necessarily want to hang out with what they would consider Yankee imperialism and, the undue influence of the United States across a region that takes perhaps more than it gives. At least that's what they would say in their countries. That isn't necessarily the case. So we'll see. But the administration insists they can continue to have healthy conversations about this. They can still unveil this immigration plan, whatever it may entail, even though leaders of those four countries closest to us that generate so much of the immigration flow won't be here.
Let me ask you about this new Morning Consult poll. It suggests that President Biden's approval rating has hit an all-time low. It's worse than former President Trump's polling numbers were at the same time 4 years ago. Have we heard from the White House? How's the White House tackling this?
Look, they understand that things are in pretty bad shape for them politically because primarily now of the economic factors. Inflation, it's just incredible, guys. You go to the grocery store or the gas station in this state to see prices the way they are. It's not just here in California, and obviously California can be a bit of an anomaly because of the higher gas taxes, but regardless, people are paying a lot more in this state and others for things. They understand that there's a big monthly inflation report coming tomorrow that's going to show another healthy uptick. The president will be spending some time at the port, at a port here in California to talk a bit about the supply chain issue and how his administration, he believes, has mostly resolved that one, at least for now. But it's going to draw more attention to the fact that the economy overall, while it's healthy in terms of job creation and growth, is forcing people to spend a lot more money. And they're taking it out on the president, who now has that incredible marker of being, in at least some surveys, more unpopular to Donald Trump, but for different reasons, right? It's because it's a pocketbook concern now. We've seen this in the past with presidents during tough economic times for people when they have to pay more or they can't find jobs. They can find jobs right now, but so much more of that paycheck's going out, and they're holding it against the White House.
Ed, as always, my friend, thank you very much.
Take care.